Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. In this video, I'm going to explore Paul Ryan's idea. So, Speaker Paul Ryan, as he is Speaker of the House of Representatives, he's standing down from his position. So, he's leaving electoral politics. But not long ago, he said there ought to be more visas to reside in the United States issued to Irish people. Now, Paul Ryan's of Irish, English, and German ancestry. And his ancestors left Hibernia in 1851, so just after the famine. It's scintillating that he should be someone who's broadly speaking against immigration. I'm not saying he's against all immigration, but wants to get it radically down. He particularly targets illegal immigration. And I know one shouldn't conflate the two. Illegal and legal are not the same issue. But he hasn't done much to speak out against the xenophobic rhetoric and the paranoia surrounding immigration, legal as well as illegal. But in his last gasp, whilst holding public office, he calls for more immigration from a particular country. It's intriguing. Why now? When we're always told the United States doesn't have enough jobs and blah, 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 and immigrants are taking jobs. Well, you want them not to work or what? Sometimes they do jobs that Americans were very reluctant to do. But that's by the by. And it's notable just how radically immigration patterns to the United States have changed. Like, you go back to the start of the 20th century, and about 90% of immigrants to the United States came from Europe, overwhelmingly Western Europe. Whereas now it's only about 10% of immigrants to the United States come from Europe, and very few of them from Western Europe, mostly Eastern Europe. So in the 90s, Irish people still wanted to move to the United States in considerable numbers. Bear in mind, the population of Ireland is now only about 7 million, so there are just not that many of us to move. So, if 100,000 Irish people come, that's a huge proportion of Ireland's population. If 100,000 Indians come, it's a drop in the ocean of their population. But Irish people, and Western Europeans in general, are less and less attracted to moving to the United States. And it's worth asking why. As recently as the 80s, there was a significant number of Irish people who were working illegally in the United States in construction, as waitresses, as barmen, all sorts. I remember reading The Accidental Diplomat. It's a memoir of an Irish diplomat who served in the United States at that time, and said it just reached embarrassing levels. And Irish Americans would tell him about it, and he'd come across these people, and he didn't want to shop them to the American authorities. On the other hand, he couldn't be seen to be condoning illegal behaviour, especially it was as harming a country that was so cordial towards the Republic of Ireland. My great-grandmother moved to Boston way back in about the 1880s and lived there for several years, long enough to gain citizenship. I don't believe she ever did. And then she returned to Eire. And in those days, it was highly unusual to return, because if you crossed the Atlantic, that's it, you were not coming back, because, of course, the voyage was quite lengthy and very pricey. So there we are, an O'Donnell. I often wonder whether I'm distantly related to Rosie O'Donnell, which I really don't want. So why is it that Irish people would rather stay in Ireland, or they move overseas at all, is usually to European Union countries, such as, let me see, France, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands? Well, all sorts of reasons. Stay in Ireland, there's more or less publicly funded healthcare. We've got we've got sort of what they call medical cards for the poorest third of the population. Obviously, the elderly and children are free, so people get healthcare through their work. But if they don't have a job or regular work, that's covered, nothing to worry about. So it is a private insurance system at times. It's not exorbitant, people are not moaning about it. We've got quite low crime, certainly fairly low murder rate, and guns are quite restricted. You have to get a gun license. For example, even an air gun firing a pellet which is just millimeters long, you require a license for that. And you can't get an air gun until you're 18. You contrast that with the United States. So I'm just telling you some of the things that make the Republic of Ireland, and indeed Northern Ireland, the law's largely the same, very different from the United States, and why Irish people would rather stay at home, or if anywhere, move to other EU countries which are kindred to Ireland in all sorts of ways. Higher education, well, there are fees, but they're very low, briefly abolished in the 90s, then brought back. The Republic of Ireland has got superb education. Now, we have about 50% of young people going on to tertiary education. Having said that, quality and quantity are not always the same thing. All right, it could be somewhat dumbed down, but you'll definitely find dumbing down in the United States. And they're not awarding degrees just for money, just because the fees are so extortionate. Well, we can't fail them because they're paying customers and blah, blah, blah. So, all right, maybe there are too many university places, but it's better to have more people getting degrees than not enough. So it's one of the highest participation rates in higher level education in the world. Contrast that about 20% of people in the United States who complete tertiary education, partly because of the eye-watering cost of even a bachelor's degree, which doesn't qualify you to do anything, then to get an unpaid internship, or then you have to, do a postgraduate qualification because you're just not distinguished enough with a bachelor's degree. We've got very clean environment. We have a superb voting system, so public opinion really is represented the full diversity of public opinion, and the gamut of that runs from revolutionary socialists to environmentalists to people who are fairly conservative. Quite a few independents get into the Oireachtas, that's the Irish Parliament. We have a great system for the Senate, which is not elected on a geographical basis, but in terms of different sections of society. We have referenda in the Constitution. Every time people seek to change the Constitution, there must be a referendum approving it, or rather I should say a plebiscite. So very different from the United States in that regard. It's a parliamentary system, though we do have a president. He is largely ceremonial, a figurehead, a ersatz monarch perhaps. Homosexual marriage was approved by plebiscite, the only country in the world to have a poll on it, and that's the way the law was changed. And abortion has just been loosened up. So all these things would make an acidulous American freak out. The idea of lots of public funding towards third level education, that wouldn't make a Republican in the United States spit blood, although it seemed like a Democrat's dream, I suppose. So we don't have much racism. We've got lots of immigration, partly from EU countries like Spain, Italy. People from the Netherlands and Germany have been coming since the 70s in serious numbers, but also places like Poland, Romania, the Czech Republic, and so forth. People from further afield move to the Republic of Ireland, like China, Ghana, Egypt, India. Our Prime Minister's half Indian, or Taoiseach, I should say, but people outside Ireland don't know what Taoiseach is. So lots of reasons why many Americans would like to move to Ireland. Indeed, there's an American college based in Dublin. So the European Union is very important to the Republic of Ireland, and there's about 90% support for being in the European Union because for centuries we're overshadowed by a much larger neighbour. Look at Great Britain now with 20 times our population. And we were united with Great Britain for some time prior to that, connected, not actually united, and blah, blah, blah. So through the EU, the Republic of Ireland was part of this comity of nations, whereas supposedly had equal footing with the other member states. Of course, they couldn't really have parity with the biggies, the big boys like Germany and the UK, but in some respects was even overrepresented in terms of per capita representation. So I think very few people in the Republic of Ireland would like to move to the United States. You look just how good it is at home, how there's fairly steady economic growth, unemployment is quite low, and all the rest of it. I remember Lord Taoiseach years ago, that's Deputy Prime Minister, Mary Harney about 20 years ago, said spiritually we're closer to Boston than Berlin. Well, I certainly feel closer to Berlin. Now, I've been to both. I actually quite like Boston, probably one of the most agreeable cities in the United States. Small enough, not too small, livable, very historic, easy to walk around by the sea. But for me, places like Germany just offer more, not being anti-American at all. So I don't think that many more Irish people would take up Ryan's offer, even if he got his way. And why particularly Irish people? Is that racial discrimination? Well, there were some sensible reasons. There's nothing to do with ethnicity. Need not be. Hope it's not. Okay, everybody in Ireland speaks English as their native tongue, just about. And as I say, we have outstanding education, and we're a fairly prosperous country, so we could do lots of white-collar jobs that the United States might have some skills shortages in certain sectors. There's already a huge Irish-American host community, so we'd have no difficulty integrating, and on and on. I mean, the United States has never had bad blood with the Republic of Ireland, or indeed Northern Ireland. Other things. Talk about health. So the Republic of Ireland's got a very good health system, as I said, and not that many people have contagious diseases. Not wanting to be demeaning towards those who suffer from communicable diseases. Someone who's ill deserves sympathy. It doesn't matter how they call this disease and ought to get medical treatment. But obviously, if someone with a contagious disease moves to another country, he or she could pass it on. And I'm not insulting all immigrants saying they're diseased, and it's not bad, not morally bad, to suffer from such an illness. But let's be objective and mature about it and not PC, and be quite frank. In certain countries, a quite high proportion of people suffer from certain diseases which can be passed on to another person. And a government has to say, salus populate lex suprema est, and try to safeguard the health and welfare of their own people. How do we try and stop an epidemic? Partly by stopping people moving, as well as other prophylactic methods. So there we are. So that would be another factor to take into consideration. I remember an Englishman married to an American was telling me the United States is the home of the paranoid and the land of the terrified. And it takes at least 2 years to get in, even as a British citizen who's married to an American. And there are just so many checks. And the US government seems to start from the presumption that someone is Osama bin Laden, and it's up to you to prove to the contrary. So it seems such a bureaucratic nightmare. This is a country that's supposed to believe in small government, and having to submit blood samples, and it can't just be to any hospital, and if it's not all done in a certain period of time, then you have to start the whole process over again. It's just a bureaucratic nightmare and a runaround. And I know the United Kingdom makes it really difficult for countries, people from outside the EU as well. Republic of Ireland makes it fairly difficult too. So there are all sorts of reasons why I think very few Irish people are inclined to move to the United States, whereas did in huge numbers previously. I think Trump has put off a lot of people. Of course, Trump is widely loathed in the in the Republic of Ireland. So that's for that. I don't think many Irish people wish to move to the United States.